Welcome to the WAIR Chats podcast, a series where we dive into conversations surrounding all facets of e-commerce and the people working to make it a more sustainable and productive industry for all. My name is Greg Moore, founder and CEO of WAIR, and your host for today's podcast. Join us as we talk with Jordan West, a journeyman, founder, and CEO who has ventured from owning a taco truck to starting a series of e-commerce brands, running a successful podcast, and managing an e-commerce agency. We cover everything from the hassles of cloth baby diapers to the future of e-commerce.
Hey, everyone. Jordan, how are you today?
I am great. Greg, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I had you on our podcast ages ago. Really looking forward to chatting with you here today.
Yeah, awesome. No, I appreciate that. It's funny. First, I should probably have you introduce yourself. We're sort of getting used to this, so we don't have our cadence done yet. But then I have a question that I want to ask you right after that, going into it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So guys, my name is Jordan West. Really, my life is everything brand and e-com. We own multiple brands, 7 as of the other day in the space. And then an agency as well that sort of wraps everything together. I love connecting with e-commerce store owners, love connecting with other people in the space. Greg's been an awesome guy to connect with. That's sort of my high level overview of what I'm up to these days. I won't tell the long, arduous story of restaurants and all of that kind of stuff yet.
No, I mean, that's kind of fun to hear. Maybe that'll come up in conversation a little bit. But
yeah,
so
perfect.
One of the things that came up really initially as I was thinking about this is that you've been on the agency side, are on the agency side, you are on the brand side, but have you ever actually developed apps for the ecosystem in a sense? Or is that kind of a new area that you may sink your teeth into in a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. That's funny that you asked that, because we just this morning were having some brainstorming sessions and talking about a few of the different apps that we just internally need to either spend lots of money on them at our agency, or we need to develop our own internal tools. And there's some really cool ways of doing that these days using Airtable that we're finding. And so that might actually be our first foray into just building some of this stuff out. So I think that some of those more functional apps that are kind of connecting people are going to be easier and easier for people to build. Stuff like you guys do, not so much.
No, it's funny. To that point, I had a conversation the other day with a relatively good size prospect, and they're like, what we're really evaluating against is whether or not we build our own solution versus buy yours. And I was like, ooh, I've been on that side of the table, and I will tell you that unless you're willing to put up a couple $1 million a year in R&D and then sustain that forever, it's probably not a good idea to build your own.
Yeah.
But I think, when we look at building apps, we don't necessarily think about like all of the time that it takes to support the app as stuff is changing, right? That stuff is really hard to do. So when you're thinking about apps for yourself, are you thinking about it more from the how do I enable what I do perspective, or more of the how do I create a technology service or app service that I can sort of sell or license into the market?
No, when I'm thinking about apps, the very first thing that I'm thinking, because of the way that our ecosystem sort of works with the brands and the agency and all of that, is really what I'm just trying to do is cut down time, right? I'm trying to figure out how in the world can we, because one of the things that happens, especially owning multiple companies, so the companies that we have are broken into 3 different business units that don't really talk between each other. Though I do try to get them to. Like today I had a sales guy from my sales manager. I had lunch with him and my sales manager at one of our clothing companies. 2 totally different types of sales that they're doing. But I was like, hey, let's get together. And, by the end of it, they had each other's numbers and are texting back and forth.
Yeah.
And for me, figuring out how we can help both our clients, and I think of my employees as our clients as well at our companies, try and get them to communicate with each other and solve the problems that we're having. Because most likely if I'm having a problem, we're all having the problem, right? Between 7 different brands, we're probably facing very similar issues that other people are facing. And so maybe if one day we can monetize those, awesome. But we really need to either find those partners, or if it's some simple software that we're able to spin up ourselves, then that's awesome. We can do that too. For me, I'm not quite as interested in the app side as I am in the brand side.
That's actually a really cool thought. They're very different businesses in that sense. So it just kind of came to my attention. One of the things that is really interesting is hearing kind of your story, right? And when I say that, sort of like what got you into e-commerce, what got you so excited about e-commerce in the first place? And then how did you extend from brand into agency, or was it vice versa, right? Was it agency and then we see opportunities in the market, so we're going to go explore those opportunities? I'm really intrigued with that because there's so much overlap, but yet also so much differentiation in that whole story.
Totally. So I'll walk you back to 2014, 2015. At this time, we'd owned a Taco Del Mar restaurant, which is a Mexican chain. We'd owned it for 4 years at this point. We're losing tons of money. We didn't really have much money to lose. I don't exactly even know how we survived, looking back now. And back in 2013, we were actually able to buy a house. Yeah. Which was really a huge saving grace because in the Vancouver area, stuff has gone up. That house has tripled in value. And so at the time, I'm like, it was very hard. It was incredibly difficult. I'm sure a lot of people had been there before. The kind of money that we lost, I think we lost around $120,000 in the end, which to me at the time was a massive amount of money. Totally, right? It was just like, I didn't know how we were going to survive. But through all of that, you started to eat.
Sorry, Jordan, you guys had kids at that time, right? Or was that just before kids?
Yeah, no, that was we had our first kid at the time. So we were doing all of that. My wife was selling jewelry at markets. She was selling fascinators for hair, for weddings. And then she'd always been in fashion design. And so she was like, I want to make some leggings for our youngest at the time, or sorry, our oldest, whatever, our baby. And we were doing cloth diapering, right? Which is the worst thing ever. If anyone's ever done it, and I know somebody's going to reach out to me on LinkedIn and be like, "It's not the worst thing ever."
I just heard my sister chiming in her head because we had this debate. So she used cloth diapers for her first son. She's like, "It's the best. They're renewable. They're sustainable. It's the best for the environment." And I was like, "Dude, you're crazy." And for her second son, she's like, there is no way in hell we're going back to cloth diapers. That was such a mess the whole time. I can't do it anymore.
Like, sure, it's great for the environment, but is people murdering each other over using cloth diapers okay, comparatively to harming the environment? I don't know, guys. I don't know because so we wouldn't have created this company without this, though. So we had these cloth diapers, and none of the leggings that she was buying from Gap or Old Navy or whatever, none of them were fitting over top of the cloth diapers nicely. Like they would just kind of not quite ride over top of them. And so she's like, she was in fashion design, creating real garments, and to create leggings is so simple. Yeah. So she just added a little bit of space and put them on her, and it was like, whoa, I think we've kind of solved this problem. And awesome. So friends started seeing these, and everyone had babies at the time, and they're like, oh, can you make some for us? Yeah. And then suddenly word just kind of got out, and we got our first wholesale account. I remember getting our first $500 order. It was like, whoa, we got a $500 wholesale order. And it's funny because I was just meeting with my wholesale rep, and it's like, okay, so your target is, in the millions this year, but those were such exciting times. I'll never forget that first retailer. I remember their name at the time was Lizzie Bits. And I'm just like the worst possible name you can think of for a store, but I'll never forget. And so they've actually changed their name since and have a new owner and stuff, but they're one of hundreds of our retailers now, but I will never forget that first big order that we had. So I was super interested in helping her out on that side. And then at the same time, I just wanted to learn e-com and learn advertising. So right around that time, I decided to start drop shipping hoverboards. That was right when hoverboards were blowing up, literally and figuratively, right? They weren't allowed on planes and because they were exploding.
My batteries back in the day, not great.
So I actually ended up, I think I remember, I never even did a profit and loss statement or opened a bank account or anything for this company, but I think we made about $30,000 that year. But I just didn't love it. So I was like, I'm going to close this because I just wasn't passionate about it. Sure. I was doing all the customer service. I didn't know anything about automating anything. I'd manually send an email to every time that we'd sell a hoverboard. It was when somebody in my hometown, which is not huge, 150,000 people, somebody in my hometown ordered and then had an issue with their board where I was like, oh, this is too close to home.
Yeah, totally.
This is, I don't want to do this anymore. So anyway, then we started growing the clothing company, and my wife and I were working together on it a lot. And I'm sure for any married folks out there, you understand, working together on a daily basis isn't actually awesome, whether you're best friends or not. Yeah. Right. I just think that there's a really good divide. And working together all the time didn't really do that for us in a great way. So at the time, I was actually a full-time paramedic, and I was painting. and had the Taco Del Mar. And I was like, something's got to give here. And I was helping her out with the business, and we started to hire employees. And I realized, I'm like, the one thing I'm really good at is marketing, right? That was the one thing at the Taco Del Mar. We tripled the sales in the time since we bought the store. But operating a business is absolutely horrific at that.
Yeah,
really good at finding people to operate, but not at operating. And so we then from there, I just started consulting with people, did so much free marketing consulting because I was just like, hey, I've got these skills that I can show you and I can help your business. And then eventually,
we try it out.
Yeah, totally. And so then eventually I was like, hey, is it okay if I charge you like $500 a month? And then we just kind of went from there. And now upGrowth, it was mindful marketing at the time, thanks to not filing trademarks in the States. We are now upGrowth Commerce. Just let that be a good lesson to you all.
That's awesome, man. I love the, it's funny. I was doing a guest lecture at San Jose State University in their business program the other week.
Cool.
And we were talking about, right, like how do you get to where you are, right? And that was kind of like the big question of the class in a sense. And I was like, does anyone think that they know exactly where they're going to go from this point on? And like maybe one or two people raise their hands. But I was like, the way that I believe in this, like, is you have your North Star, the stuff that gets you up in the morning, you get really excited about, and then you just have to be tenacious in getting it and then totally adaptable because you have no clue where the path is going to take you.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because hearing this story, you may think that it's all totally disjointed, but at the end of the day, there's this like flavor of connectivity into it, which is that you really want to wake up and do what you love. And what you love is sort of continuing to evolve as you get more and more experiences. And then you're just sort of tracking it back together, which is really cool.
Yeah. Can I hop on that metaphor for 1 second, Greg?
Yeah, please.
So it's interesting when you talk about that, right? Like with that North Star, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people don't understand what that North Star is. I think that a lot of people have gone into business because they think that North Star is money, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to let everybody know that's a really crappy North Star. And it's a North Star that's going to absolutely disappoint you when you get there, right? Like you will be incredibly disappointed when you have $1 million in the bank and you're like, what? It didn't, or 10 million or whatever it is, right? And you're like, wait, that didn't do it for me. That wasn't it. So I just wanted to jump on that for 1 second because I think that's something really important that you learn over time, that you're like that's not the North Star, right? That's just something that happens as a result of doing stuff that you love to do, right. And that you're passionate about and that you can make the world a better place doing.
I love that. I love that concept of it because at the end of the day, there's so many people out there driving for money, but they're going to quickly learn that you can never have enough if that is your ultimate goal.
Never enough. There's never.
Yeah. So what are some of the lessons that you would want to tell your old self, maybe like 3 big things in finding that North Star, right? Like how would you, looking back to your Taco Del Mar days, say like, all right, I don't like this and I need to go figure out something that I do like. How would you kind of advise yourself through that journey if you were to look back again?
Yeah, such a good question, Greg. And just so everyone knows, Greg did not preface me with these questions, so I'm going to have to come up with an answer here. No, immediately as soon as you said that, there's
a framework. It's got to be enumerated. It's got to.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I am going to give you a couple of those right off the top of my head. So number 1 is get to know yourself, right? I think the problem is a lot of us start out, in our early 20s, and when you're that age, you really just don't know yourself, right? You think you do. But I look back now and I'm like, I love that person that was there, but man, he didn't really know himself very much, right? And what he was good at. So number 1, I'd say figure out, get to know yourself and some ways to be able to do that. There's so many great tools out there to be able to do that. Personality wise, you can go over to tools like Enneagram. You can figure out okay, how do I fit here, right? In this sort of circumstance. On the work side, Clifton Strengths. I'm absolutely obsessed with using Clifton Strengths in all of our companies. There's 35 different strengths. They have been at this for years. There's something like, I'm not even going to get the number right. It's in the hundreds of millions of people that have used Clifton Strengths.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's that many people that have used them. To me, I would say Jordan, go figure out what your strengths are and then don't do anything but those, right? Figure out how to hire out every other strength for you, and then figure out which strengths work for what kinds of employees, right? Like for salespeople and for marketing people, and what does a strength makeup look like? Because we all can have like pretty good gut, reactions on hiring people or whatever. And we all know like people who have gotten to a certain level, it's like, it's not about you anymore. It's just about who you hire. That's
Right.
really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So that would be the big thing that I would tell myself. And then the other one that I wish I would have learned even sooner was to really learn and digest the 7 habits of highly effective people. To me, that is the framework that I base most decisions off of, in whether it's negotiating, whether it's figuring out just like a hard problem. It's like, hey, I run this through my principles, and 7 habits happen to be part of those principles that I have. So it's funny, I remember these conversations when I was in my early 20s being like, I just hate when people use like the word principled.
Yeah.
And they use principles because it's like, no, you should be able to like be adaptive. Yeah. Like you're in that sort of phase. And now I'm like, no, I don't make a decision unless it goes through a principle, because that's just, I've made so many bad decisions over the years.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I think, God, I was looking at Twitter this morning and I cannot remember who was talking about this specifically, but they were talking exactly like that. Like every decision, then they had some limit for what they were talking about, but like every decision that's over X, right? Or of Y importance or whatever it is, needs to go through these frameworks. And of course it was a thread that's talked about like what the frameworks are. But at the end of the day, thinking about exactly what you're saying, right? You have this concept where when you're younger, it's like, I just want to live. I just want to do. I'm going to wake up and make a decision, right?
Yeah.
And then you end up making a lot of bad ones. And then you're like, oh, okay, maybe we should change that and like put some framework around this stuff. It's interesting because I'm seeing like the generation sort of behind us, maybe like the half generation behind us, they're starting to do that earlier. Have you ever thought about like there's big people in their 20s now are doing the same things that I was doing in my 30s. And I'm like, where did you learn this stuff from? I mean, it's awesome to see it.
I do. I've got a bunch of thoughts on this stuff too, which I think are, I don't know if my thoughts are interesting. I think that the ideas around it are interesting. There's this concept called spiral dynamics, which is all about like how societies evolve levels of consciousness. And essentially there's all these different levels. It would be a long time to sort of get into it, but they're color-coded levels of consciousness essentially. And the top of first tier consciousness is green, right? And so green is all about caring for the environment. It's all about pluralistic. It's kind of the society that we live in. If you get stuck in this sort of green level, you become kind of mean, right? And look down on a lot of people. But the beautiful part of it is like the society that we're in North America right now, and the sort of level of consciousness that we're all at as a center is in that green, right? So you see these people coming up and they actually care about these things that took us 20 years to figure out, right? Because they're raised in that sort of that water, that's the water that they're swimming in. Anyway, I could go on and on about this stuff, and I do all the time with friends. So.
Check out Jordan's podcast. I'm sure he goes through this as well.
Yeah.
No, that's great. All right, so one, we could probably talk just randomly forever, and I think it's amazing. So I love just kind of going down these threads. But going to the nature of like e-commerce, when you're looking at the e-commerce world right now, like what are some of the biggest challenges and or opportunities that you think we're going to face as an e-commerce ecosystem, including the brands over the next like 5 years? I don't want to say 10 because that's too far, but 5's like, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So for the next 5 years, this is what I'm seeing, and I'm going to be really selfish in what I'm talking about because this is what I'm doing and what I'm seeing and where I'm putting my money right now. And I really truly believe that those brands that are kind of in that 1 to 3 million sort of range are going to have an intense time getting through this next couple of years. I think that that's going to be really, really difficult from a cash flow perspective, even from a talent perspective. We're still having a really hard time hiring people.
Yeah.
I think that work is going to look a lot different in the next 5 years, right? I think that we're kind of going through all of that storming right now of like, what does this look like? The whole quiet quitting.
Yeah, totally.
There's all of that kind of stuff that we're really going to have to figure out. I think that getting to the level where you believe in interdependence and integration is where those are the people who are going to survive in e-commerce. So what does that look like exactly, right? So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're rolling up a bunch of brands in the outdoor space, right? not rolling them up so we can make a boatload of money on the back end, right? That's not the reasoning we're doing this. We're doing it because I know what it feels like to be an e-commerce store owner or just a business owner and be so ridiculously alone, right? And so what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to bring these owners alongside in this group, right? And give them support. So we're not saying, hey, we want to buy 90% of your business. We're saying, hey, join the group. You're going to give up a bit of equity to join the group, but oh man, are you ever going to have the ability to thrive, right, in this environment? I think that the people who understand that, and not necessarily just like my model, right, but like understand that model, that you don't need to be competitive with each other, right? One of my good friends owns a shoe company, and I'm hosting a dinner tomorrow night in Vancouver, and the founder of a massive shoe company is going to be there. And so for me, I'm super excited for him. I'm like, dude, you gotta figure out how you guys can connect, right? Connect and integrate, and maybe they buy you, maybe they take a big interest in you because they make different kinds of shoes. But like, those are the kinds of examples that I'm seeing. Those are the people that are going to survive. The lone wolves may not. Right? They might not.
Are you seeing this as like a kind of like there's an aggregation happening, or more of like partnerships in a sense, right? Is it more like, I'm going to buy a majority stake of your company, we're going to run on the same operating system on the backside so that we can take advantage of economies of scale, but then we also have those relationships where we can share and foster ideas to make the whole thing better? Or is it more a looser term than that, like just these groups that are starting to get created, like the D2C commerce community, where these groups are coming together, they're starting to feed off one another? Are you seeing it more as like an equity-based play, or more of just a relationship-based play?
A bit of both, right? So for us in the group, right, that's going to be an equity-based play, right, where they're able to come into this group, get a ton of support, give up some equity to the group itself, right, but for the greater group. That to me is like the far play out of all of this, right? I think it really starts with just being like, hey, I can actually keep my cards open a little bit here. Right. Like that's one thing that I don't see that I see the people who will be successful in the next little while are going to be a lot more transparent and know the need for other partners out there, not necessarily just on an equity level, right? Or in a money sort of level. It's funny, like you and I have chatted a little bit about this recently, where like I've bootstrapped everything my entire life. And now I'm getting into this phase where I'm seeing the incredible value of bringing on strategic investors, right? Not just from the money side, but just from having that support, right? And knowing that, like, man, they know way more than I do. I think that those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about and that I'm thinking about that will help us all survive whatever this is, right? Why would you have a warehouse that you could triple the size of just have for yourself? When you could easily bring another brand in there. Right. And help them and help you. So when people really understand, like, 7 habits, the habit of win-win is not just some sales phrase. It's actually figuring out, man, what would like 100% win be for you, Greg? I want to make sure, and I'll let you know exactly what my win is. But without transparency, you can't really do that. Right. Then we're all holding our cards really tight together. So that's kind of the general sort of idea of like what I see.
I think that's really interesting. I was speaking with a gentleman named Marco. He runs VP of partnerships at a firm, and he was talking about how when you start your partnerships program, the thing that you want to really, really focus on almost more than anything is, what can I give, right? Over and over and over and over again, right? So it's dropping down those walls. It's finding opportunities to be productive for somebody else. And he goes, in every sense of the word, that has created more value coming back to me than anything else, because I never expect for it to come back. And so people take it like, they just take this altruistic type of approach. And it's like in the book Influence, right? I mean, this is exactly what it's about, is how do you gain that influence? You gain the influence by being a great person and trying to give it to other people. And so in this sense, like breaking down those laws or those walls is something I think that's really, really powerful there. So cool.
Absolutely. And it's so different than the way that we were raised, right? Like, even if you look at like the old movies, right? It's like, no, every man for himself. Yeah, that's right. If I don't screw you, you're going to screw me. Like that whole sort of idea. And like, man, that's not the new, and I, especially having, from having like investor talks, within 30 seconds, if you're talking to that kind of person or not. Yeah. Right. And for me now, I just say, hey, this doesn't feel like a fit. Let's both not waste each other's times, because I can tell culturally this isn't going to work. Right. And Yeah.
It's really funny to that point, because on the one hand, like when you're really early in, like when we first raised money for Fit3D, right, which was my former company, well, I guess still current company, but we're running two of them now. So with Fit3D, right, we'd have that, and it was pertinent. We had to raise money, right, just based on the product. This is very expensive to build, deploy, and everything else. And I didn't have the skills at that time, right? So every meeting, we'd leave every meeting like, oh, this is great, totally money, money, money. That's really all we thought about, because we needed it to get to the next step.
Yeah.
Now with WAIR, on the other hand, it's really funny because we have investors literally reaching out to us probably every day, every other day. And my number one thing is, your money is generally free, right? What is the strategic value that you bring to the team?
Yeah.
How can you help us operate better? How can you teach us wisdom? Who can you connect us to, right? And to that point, aligning with investors that have a similar vision, and then also can really help you as the CEO or as the founding team grow into what you know you can be. So important, and it's so overlooked. The first time you're going out to raise money, you don't have that tool set.
And how do you get it? Besides experience, right? Besides like banging your head against the wall and figuring this stuff out. It's really hard to get that experience. Like Greg and I can tell you these things, right? But until you really like figure out, especially on the money side, right? The money side is difficult because as soon as you come in desperate, no one's going to give you money, right? Well, maybe they'll give you money, but you're the desperate one, right?
When you don't need it, yeah.
yeah. So like I go into every single one of these conversations to let them know, like, hey, we all know that there is an exorbitant amount of capital out there waiting to be deployed, literally desperate to be deployed in some of these VC companies and even private equity companies. They're literally desperate to deploy this capital and get it working because they have people that they're answering to.
That's right. Yeah. Their LPs are like, all right, you took a year off.
yeah, exactly. Hey, what's that $50 million doing sitting there losing 8% this year?
I haven't gotten a call yet. So I need a call on the capital. No, it's real. It's real. There's a lot of dry powder sitting out there right now.
Totally. So making sure that you have those sorts of mentalities going in, especially before raising capital or anything like that. And in any sort of scenario, right? Making sure that like whenever I go into any kind of negotiation or conversation, it's always as an equal, right? Yeah. And I think that that's really important, whether you're 20 years old or you're, the ripe old age that Greg and I are right now, which we're not going to say. Really trying to make sure that is level, right? Yeah. That you have that sort of level playing field, because that's really important. I used to always take the lower position, right? Because I thought that was the right thing to do.
Now, what conditioned you to do that? Can you think back, like what got you to that point where you would take that lower position in a relationship like that or in a negotiation like that?
It always worked, right? It kind of worked to be able to go into that lower position and be like, oh yeah, like I'll just defer to whatever you want, and yeah, okay, I get that, right? But that doesn't actually get you to where you want to be. Right? That's again, going through 7 Habits a billion times like I have. And I've taught it to every one of our companies. Like personally, I've taught it because I really believe in it that much.
Yeah.
That is not win-win, right? Win-win is coming in as two whole human beings saying, this is what I need. Tell me exactly what you need. And let's try to make this work. Whereas coming in on the lower side is like lose-win. I'm okay to lose as long as you get what you want. Right. And I think a lot of like nice guys do that. But it's not actually kind, right? It might look nice, but it's not actually, it's not going to get anybody what they want.
No, it's so enabling at the end of the day, right? You're never going to create a relationship that's going to be a positive relationship in the future. So you end up having to dig yourself out of that hole to try to find that balance over time, which is a horrible place to be in.
Yeah. You might as well start again. Start again with those relationships.
And with investors, you can't, right? They're on your cap table, so you're there.
Yes.
That's the tricky part, right? That's awesome. All right, so we're running out of time, but I'm loving this conversation. So one of the other questions that I'd have, are you okay to go for a little bit? Because this is kind of fun.
I'm good. I've got about 10 more minutes here.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So one of the things, so we talked about sort of this like aggregation that's coming on the brand side. What are some of the similar types of trends we're seeing on the tooling side, right? There is like the marketplace is starting to get so crowded, and at the end of the day, I think most tools that are out there for any e-commerce enablement are all like increased conversions, reduction of returns, right? Increased AOV, like, whatever. The KPIs are all the same, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so what are you seeing as like the next big things? What are the big points of differentiation that brand enablers, like vendors, can have into that market as they're talking to you as an e-commerce brand owner?
Yeah, totally. So that's a great question, and I think about you guys in this sort of scenario, right? And how I really believe that at WAIR, you guys have created this ability for win-win, right? I'll tell you, I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm going to name some companies who I don't think are doing this.
Mhm.
Klaviyo is one of them. Gorgeous is one of them. That I think, and I understand they have investors that they have to reach out to, but they are no longer in a win-win game, right? They now, and I know this is super controversial. Go ahead, you can send it to them. They sponsor me for stuff. But from that perspective, I think they're just trying to milk people now, especially Klaviyo, right? Klaviyo knows that they're kind of the only game in town, and so they've changed their pricing to be insane this year.
Yeah, they just recently went through a price increase, didn't they?
Like a massive price increase, and multiple times. Like they used to have unlimited emails at any stage that you were at, and now it's all limited. So people end up paying about double for the same service that they had before.
Yeah.
So those kinds of services, yes, they might be winning now, and it might look good now, and they'll probably go public and figure out their pricing model at some point. But those are the ones that I look at that I'm like, oh, you've lost the thing that made you, right?
Yeah.
Now you're just concerned about just extracting as much money from a market that is already having a really difficult time this year because you think you're the only name in the game, right? So that I don't love. I think that the people who are winning are the ones who have aligned, not just aligned values, but also aligned ways of making money, right?
Yeah.
Did my tool actually assist in making you extra money, right? Over and above what you would have made anyway? Like let's talk Klaviyo for a second. Klaviyo versus MailChimp. Right now, the MailChimp has a Shopify integration again. We all started with MailChimp back in the day. And now we laugh at it, even though you look at their pricing and how they're aligned, and you're like, oh, actually MailChimp might make a lot more sense now because they're actually aligning with the market, they're aligning with what sellers need, not with what their shareholders need.
Yeah.
Right.
Got it.
So I think that any time that you the tools and the companies that are making these tools that are going to be successful are thinking about their end user, and their end user is the store owner, right? That is the person that they need to be constantly obsessed with, just like e-com store owners need to be obsessed with their customers and who they are. Right. Those are the people that I think that they need to really be serving and figuring out, like, hey, this is what we need on the pricing side. How do we make this work and show the value for that? Right.
How do you? So makes total sense. It's funny. We'll give a little shameless plug here for WAIR, but one of the things that we're really focused on in our pricing is that like we have like ROI baked into the pricing, or the pricing is literally built to provide ROI. So it's like, if you're going to pay us $1, we're going to give you 30 back, right?
Yeah.
And we can track it, and then every single month we show it to you, which I think is really interesting, which aligns with a lot of what you're talking about in that sense.
Yeah.
That being said, however, I'm really interested in, because the other part of that is most of the earlier stage companies are also trying to pitch that same game, whether they do or don't. So how do you, as the owner, sniff through that, right? How do you figure out like, oh, okay, these guys are legit, and these people over here are like, they're saying a lot of stuff, but I don't know if I believe it. Like, how do you try out these tools?
Yeah, totally. The first question that I ask is like, how are you tracking this? Is this based on, especially like there's some tools that will do like view through data, and you're like, no, just because they saw your tool doesn't mean that you get any credit for that. And the ones who will actually look and be like, hey, incrementally, comparatively to when we're not on the website, like another great pitch for WAIR is that you guys split test traffic that doesn't show WAIR.
Yeah.
Right. So you're constantly having the split test between their tool and not their tool. Rep.ai is another great example. They do the same kind of pricing as you guys do. And I love what they're doing because they're always split testing it against not even having it on the website. Right. So just the presence of their tool, does that help? Right. Because then we actually know, because we've split tested both of them and we're constantly split testing them.
Right. No, I think that's awesome. It's funny when we we did the split test at first, not even for a sales enablement perspective, but really so that we could understand the value that we're providing to our tool
Yeah.
and or to our customers. And I'll never forget it. We were working with, I think it was Fresh Clean Teas, and we had the split test up, and they were seeing like such big numbers, and they're like, just please turn off the split test. Like we want to get rid of our size chart, so we only have you guys, but we can't do that if you're split testing. And and our engineers were like, no, we want that data so that we know how to continue to improve. So it's actually this battle between our customer and our engineers of whether or not we turn off the split testing, because they wanted to totally remove their size charts and force everybody through us. It's like we flew that flag on the business side. I went to the battle and I was like, dude, we're going to fly this flag on the business side because that's awesome. That's really cool.
That's so great. I love hearing that. So those are the kinds of partners we're looking for these days.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. All right. So last question for me. If you had to spend full time either as a brand or as an agency, right, which would you choose and why?
Brand 100% of the time.
Yeah.
I love the brand side so much. I feel like there is so much impact as a brand that we can have. The agency is a wonderful tool. People who hire agencies, you know why you hire an agency, right? It's specialty. It's trying to hire somebody at the price that you pay for an agency. You're generally always going to be paying about double, right? To try to get that same kind of unicorn that agencies have already gotten. But right. for me, there is a limit to the agency side and the agency size. Whereas with a brand, there's not. And brands can get out there and do incredible things and create partnerships that are well beyond what an agency could do on its own, right? A brand is almost like a living being, right? That you create, like it's like a baby, right? That you bring out in the world and you're like, this is my baby.
Diapers, but
yeah, exactly. So that's why I love the brand side so much. Yeah. I think that there's so much experimentation to do there. It's really solving a lot of people's problems. That's where I want to live for, I don't know, the next long time.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I love that answer. I mean, I think at the end of the day, agencies are so valuable and so beneficial, and they enable most of e-commerce to be successful. But at the same time, as a brand, like creativity is just off the wall. You can do whatever you want. You can add whatever product lines you want. You can change it. Like there's so much fun that you can have with it, which is, I think, is a really, once you get past that point of like, yes, I feel comfortable, we've hit product market fit, like we've done all the things we have to do to get to one. Now there's just this inherent opportunity ahead of you, which is just a ton of fun. It's really cool.
It really is. Yeah. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. Awesome. Jordan, man, this was great. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We love working with you and your wife and your team. And look forward to many more conversations. Maybe not so public next time, but many more conversations.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Greg. Appreciate you having me on here.
Great. Thanks, buddy. I'll see ya.